Welcome to Fridays at Noon. My name is Ken Pinnock. I'm the Director of People Development. And today we are going to continue our Friday at Noon series on the 8 simple rules for managing conflict with Greg Giesen, our Manager of People Development. Welcome. How are you?
Thank you. Good.
Good to see you. I work with you, yet we hardly see each other over the past couple of weeks. But with this series, I just a reminder that you can access the previous 6 episodes on the People Development website underneath the Fridays at Noon tab. And you also can access articles which align with the content that we speak about with each video. Mm-hmm. So it's all there for you. So please, I encourage you to check it out. And today, though, we're talking about Rule 7. So we're almost there.
Yep.
But with that, so jump in. Tell us about Rule 7.
All right. Well, Rule 7 is called Manage the What and the How. And let me explain this. There's the what the conflict is about, and there's the how it's being communicated, the communication around it. Mm-hmm. Another way to put that is the what represents the conflicting issue, the how represents the relationship component. Mm-hmm. Both need to be addressed in order for conflict to be successful.
Okay. So with the 2 dimensions of the what and the how, does one have more sway or influence than the other?
Yeah, it definitely does. Winning an argument, but destroying the relationship in the process is obviously not an effective end result. And keep in mind, I'm talking about resolving a conflict at work versus a child custody case, right? Where it might be a different strategy.
Right.
So the relationship aspect of conflict sets the table for the conflict resolution. And so it is the critical piece, precursor, that has to also be done during and after in order for the conflict to be effective. So let me ask you this. Who of these 2 people, who would you rather have a conflict with? Somebody who wants to hear your perspective, is respectful, wants to resolve the issue, sees their part in the conflict, and has a calm demeanor, or somebody who believes they are right, gets in your face, talks at you, not to you, uses hateful or judgmental language, makes the conflict personal, or simply refuses to even talk to you?
I would have to go with number 1.
Number 1.
Number 1.
Well,
but the first
those
individual
are the how part of conflict, and that's why it's so significant. So the fact is, if you're yelling at me, I'm going to shut down and not hear what you're saying because I'm reacting to the yelling part. Mm-hmm. If you are blaming me, I'm going to defend myself because I feel like I'm being attacked. If you disrespect me, I'm going to also shut down and kind of be angry and maybe want to defend myself as well with you. And what happens there is the what part of conflict, which is the issue, gets destroyed because the how part was mishandled. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like a lose-lose. When you're not mindful of the how, you destroy the what in its process. And so the end result is the relationship gets damaged regardless whether you win the argument. And another downside to that is if you damage the relationship in an interaction, the likelihood of having a successful conflict resolution in the future with that person is very minimal because the relationship's kind of been destroyed. So you have to then fix the relationship to even have a conversation.
To get back to the initial
conflict.
conflict.
And one other point, and you've heard of this back from when we were both trainers at Mountain States. There's a study called the Moravian study, and it's the impact that communication has on people. And what they say is 55% of the communication is body language, 38% is tone of voice, and only 7% are the actual words. So if you think about that, they're really saying that the value of the how is incredible in terms of what's received when you're communicating.
It's the majority of the message.
Yeah.
So, and also when you're referencing talking about the what, ironically, that makes it personal. Then the focus, even though it's on the whatever the issue is, turns into
exactly
going after the person.
Yeah.
So What derails people from being mindful of the how? I mean, why this is hard? Why is this hard for people?
There's probably a lot of reasons. Some of the top ones would be, I think, impulsivity, reacting, immediately with emotion, I think, is one of the ones. This need to be right or have control in a conversation could impact that, because that becomes the motive. And then people aren't even thinking about the dynamics. And speaking about the emotions, those are probably the biggest trigger. It could be feeling attacked, feeling embarrassed could trigger that, being told we're wrong, which could create an autopilot response, feeling like it's unfairness or injustice in terms of what's happening could trigger that. Actions we totally disagree with, where we immediately want to defend or respond to it, so we're not conscious of the dynamics. It could be, reacting to their how. So if they're coming on a certain way, and we have an autopilot response to that. And I would say also, and we'll talk more about this, but failure to apply rules 1 through 6.
I was going to say that it seems like it appears there's alignment here with these.
Which are, as we'll get into, but they're really all about the how, if you think about it.
Well, I have to, you typically have some good anecdotes and stories related to these rules. Do you have any that are notable to you?
Yeah, and of course I do.
To this?
And here's one where, this program, Leading from Within, so it used to be a 3-day, 2-night in the mountains program where I co-facilitated with another guy who kind of had a slightly different personality style than me, which was a strength in the program, because he did the activities, I did the content, and it was in a cabin in the mountains and things like that. Well, being the organized person I am, I know you don't know that, but I am.
It's good for me.
I sent him the outline a couple weeks ahead of time, so he kind of knew, just remind him what we were going to do. And he's more in the moment kind of guy, and so I'm assuming he saw it, read it, was good with it. He would have said something. We get to the retreat the night before it starts, and I'm like, well, any other questions about the outline? He's like, what outline? I'm like, are you kidding me? And he never saw it, he never looked at it. He's like, and then so now we're already under a little stress. I'm like, okay, well, here's what it was. And I'm a little frustrated, because now and he's like, that won't work, and he's arguing with me with the outline, and part of me is like, you don't have a reason to be arguing, because you had 2 weeks. And so we both realized in the moment that the tension was high, the how part was not good for us to have this conversation. So we know each other well enough over the years that luckily for that, so we tabled it and said, you know what? Let's just do the best we can. We'll come back to this after the program. And so what happened is, we're experienced trainers, and so we pulled it off, and it worked well. Everything was great, but we still had that unresolved piece, right? So here's how we dealt with it. And we're not thinking about any of this stuff. This is just kind of our natural way. But we went out to have breakfast, a week after the program was over. And at breakfast, this is kind of how the breakfast went. We sat there and we chit-chatted about, just superficial things for a half hour while we're eating our breakfast. And then we got to the point where one of us said, all right, so, and I don't remember exactly who said what, but all right, so what about what happened at the retreat? And the other one said, you know what, I've thought about it. What if we always make sure we meet face-to-face 1 week before, just so that we always have that tradition, and we can talk out anything we need to talk about? And the other one's like, excellent. All right, high five. We were out of there.
That was it.
Now, here's the point of that, though. We had an issue, and the issue was, about going through an outline ahead of time, and did you get it, didn't you get it, that kind of stuff, being prepared. That was the issue. The how part was we respected each other's, both personally and professionally. And so the chit-chat was setting the how part up so that we were comfortable in each other's presence, and we reaffirmed the relationship in that chit-chat. So when the how is in place, bringing up the what, you could solve world peace in that situation because you're feeling comfortable in the presence of the other person. And we just automatically did that. And so the what was easy because we felt comfortable in the how. And that's kind of the story I wanted to bring up because it works and it does make a difference.
Something you mentioned when you, the night before you tabled that issue, the what, that's a good point about conflict in that sometimes the ramp up is that we think we have to solve it right then, right there.
Yeah.
And the fact you guys could put the brakes on, one, it shows me there's a good amount of trust there.
Yeah.
And that knowledge that we'll fix it later, and that's okay.
Yeah, and we didn't just table the what, it was because the how was tense.
Right. So
that we knew that it wasn't a good time to discuss the what. And that's probably the mindfulness part of that moment because I'm guilty of sometimes, as you know, and I mean we all are, but of not seeing it and going through with the what when the how is tense. And that's the biggest mistake I think people make, and that's the mindful piece of Rule 7.
Interesting. And the ladder sounds in there as well.
Yeah, which we'll talk about.
May come back to. You also, as a conflict mediator, how do you help people with the how in that setting, which at times can be a little more formal, a little more, I don't want to say serious, but more formal.
Well, and of course you are too. You mediate conflict. So I want to show this is really the methodology behind kind of what we do actually. And not everybody thinks of this, but this is an example of Bob and Sally are having a conflict, right? And what typically happens in this scenario is they go at each other, and the downside of this is it's not just Sally mad at Bob and Bob mad at Sally, but they're mad at each other in general. Like it becomes personal here because it's about Bob, and for Bob it's about Sally, and it's about because she does this and she does this, and so it becomes not just about the work issue, but it's about them as a person. I mean, this gets very personal. So in conflict mediation, what we do is we separate out the Bob and Sally and help them see that it's not about Bob or Sally, it's about this one issue that is blocking the Bob and Sally piece. And by doing that, it diffuses the personalization, right? And now they're both trying to solve the issue that helps them be effective. And so that's what happens in a conflict mediation is we try and get them to the point of what is it getting in the way between the two of you, and that becomes the focus, not each other.
I see.
And all of a sudden it's not personal, people are willing to talk, it's easier to solve problems this way. So that's kind of what we do, and some of the other things to contribute to that is teaching them a little bit about how to enter a conversation where it doesn't trigger the other person. So there's some teaching around just the skill component of having a conversation. There's also helping them do some pre-work about what is the issue so they can separate out Bob from the issue, and Bob can separate out Sally from the issue. So before they get to the table with the facilitation, they've done some thinking about that. So then they're more ready to move forward. It's less personal. Sometimes, though, if you think about our role in those situations, we manage the how. If someone's out of line, we'll interrupt and get them to slow down and say what they meant. We'll help the how part so that they can then feel comfortable that that's being managed, and then they can have their conversation. And then, of course, lastly is we can provide coaching before, during, or afterwards, which I often do, because sometimes, just one session might not be enough for people to kind of feel it's resolved. Right,
and sometimes the mediation or the facilitation brings up issues that need follow-up.
Sometimes right at the end. When it's time's up, and then what?
They're like, I have one more thing, right? Always at the end.
Or they feel like that maybe they got triggered a little bit and they didn't have a chance to talk that through. So that's where the coaching helps, and sometimes the follow-up facilitated conversation too.
That's The I kind of alluded to it, but the other, with respect to the other roles we've worked through, how does the previous rules tie in to number 7 and vice versa?
Well, and I'm going to go through all of them just real quickly, but in general, what they do is they all help manage the how so that the what can be effective, right? Like the first rule was begin with the end in mind, and really the key there is to have a focus on what you want to talk about and kind of do the preparation so that you know what you want, what a win-win conversation would look like. So that eliminates a lot of the dysfunctional how, because you're focused on what you want and you can stay focused. The second one was stay off the ladder that you alluded to earlier, and what that does is it eliminates any assumptions we're making about the other party, because most conflicts have a ton of assumptions that are creating the emotion. Right. And by thinking that through and identifying what is it you do know and what is it you don't know, it makes it easier to have a conversation, because you're not loaded with assumptions and all this emotion that comes with that. The third one is choose your style, and the point of that is that we all have a natural conflict style, but it's not necessarily the best style for whatever that issue is. And by choosing your style, it forces you to think through, well, what do I need and what style would get me to resolution? So it kind of complements the first two, and you're more focused. And it's an intentional style to get results, so there's less how dynamics there. The fourth one was take the initiative, and that's if it doesn't, is to let go of the ego and who's at fault, who's right or wrong, and to realize that if it's bothering you, it is your issue because you're wearing it, and that the best thing you could do is address it early on so that you can relieve yourself of that burden, but also it makes you a little bit more constructive because you don't have as much weight and built up about it, and so you're more effective there. The fifth one was focus out before focusing in. What that means is the ability to listen and hear the other person's side first. Like, let them go, acknowledge that you hear them, validate it. Doesn't mean you agree, but validate it. And it gives you all the data you need then to have a conversation, and they feel more relaxed because you were present with them and you heard them, and it lowers their defensiveness because you're clearly there to collaborate. And that helps. And then rule 6, the one we did most recently, was ask for what you need. And that's really all about the how, because if you know it's the unmet need that creates the conflict, and most people don't go that deep in their self-analysis. If you know what needs not being met, then, as we instructed in that rule, figure out how to ask for it in a way that doesn't make the other party wrong, but it's really just in our relationship, this would help me if you could do this. And so that's being mindful of the how. So all of these really play into that to make it an effective conversation.
Yeah, that's... I had a thought there, but I'm going to come back to it. So I want to... What if there's already tension between a couple of people, two people, but nothing's erupted, but it's there?
Yeah.
And, are there ways that we can diffuse? We talk about escalating or de-escalating conflict when it's all in the moment, but in advance of that, things that can be done to try to diffuse it.
Yeah, and there are, and this comes from the notebook that goes with the class, 8 Simple Rules. And anybody can email me to get a copy of this. It's just greg.giesen@du.edu. And on page 13, it's part of the class, these are for exactly what you're talking about, the ones that aren't out of hand, but it's just a way of checking in with people. And so there's 3. One is the check-in, which is something as simple as, you seem kind of quiet, are you okay? It's a way to put out feelers to see if the other person, to get them talking a little bit, just so it's not being held on to. Are you all right? Is everything all right? Or was I out of line yesterday? Those are kind of examples of the check-in. They're very light, simple, but it opens the door.
It's also showing your own vulnerability or willingness to kind of take that step.
Which is critical. And then there's ask for feedback. So this is a little bit more direct. It could be, I didn't feel good about the exchange we had yesterday. Are you okay with what happened, and should I have done something differently in that? So you're asking for feedback, or how can I be more supportive of you? I feel like I haven't been lately, or I know I can get a little abrasive at times. Have I been that way lately with you? So that's kind of a little bit more direct, but it's, again, putting yourself out there and making yourself vulnerable. So it's real easy for them to respond, and then it never builds up. And then the last way is asking a clarifying question. And what that is, it could be something as simple as, yesterday in the meeting, you made a comment about this or that, and I may have taken it the wrong way. So can you explain kind of what you meant by that? That's a clear. So I'm asking you to expound on something that you said, so that I don't go up the ladder, essentially, is what that's about. Or your email was a bit confusing. So instead of no judgment there, I was just confused by your email. Can you kind of elaborate more on what you need from me in that report? Things like that. And that way, it just gets, you clear up any miscommunications or confusions in your head, and they get to expound, and then it just kind of makes, so the conflict never surfaces, really.
It diffuses it, opens the door. And a lot of I messages in a number of those statements
because
as well.
I was owning it,
right?
And that makes it so much easier for someone else to then respond, as opposed to me using you.
Yeah.
You sent the confusing message.
Right.
So right there, I'm just adding salt on the wound there.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's so. The other extreme with this, though, is if you have two employees where it's not under the water, it's right out in the open, all out conflict, but they're not interested in having facilitator or mediator. I have a situation right now, they're like, nope, we're going to fix it ourselves.
Yeah.
I mean, how might they use this process to self-manage it?
Yeah, and one thing I would say is, in those situations, it's good for them to still seek out coaching before, just so, to go over the steps. But I'm not going to go through all of them, but basically this is also in the notebook. It's page 15, and it's the formal approach. And basically it lines up, here's preparation for both parties, which goes through some of the 6 rules, really, which is what part do you play in it, what needs not being met, kind of what mindset are you in, and if you're emotional, what do you need to do? So it kind of gives you the preparation piece. And then it's a format that, for a formal conflict mediation, typically people would follow, which is, setting the stage, why this conversation matters, what's our outcome, and, so you start with a positive, and it's like, so that they can start from that point of view. And then it's defining kind of what issue triggered me and how I interpreted it and what I need from you, and then for you being able to do the same thing back and forth. And there's creating options, agree to a solution, and then there's really touch base after the conversations happen, just to make sure we're good and that made sense. And so this is really a step-by-step process, which could be very helpful for people that want to take a shot at it themselves.
But as you said, we are always here, the people development team, if people want to circle back even after the fact.
And I think of some people, because we've changed our what we call the conflict mediation to a facilitated conversation. And the difference is, what we're creating now, and it's, is a safety zone, a time and a space and a location where 2 parties can come and talk it out, and we'll do a little coaching or a little facilitation, but basically it's their chance to do this, but in the presence of a third party, in case it does kind of go astray, or we can kind of help them. And so they have more control of that process versus, conflict mediation, typically we would be going, well, what do you think? And we'd be kind of controlling it. Well, we've decided to not do that, instead of just create this space. So it's really a great way to do this, would be with us there to kind of hold the safety zone,
Right. But it is still based upon, proven mediation techniques.
Right.
It's reframed a bit, if you will, for the kinds of workplace issues that are most common. So then, with respect to mindfulness, that's come up in almost each of the rules. Do you have advice in managing the how, what that looks like when you're talking out a conflict.
Yeah. Well, of course, the best case scenario would be to go through rules 1 through
right.
now would be rules 1 through 7.
Yeah.
Because that's going to create enough self-awareness that, and you'll be able to kind of move forward with intent. So that's the best thing.
Mm-hmm.
But, there is an article, and it was called Can We Talk? And in it, it gave advice on like how to show up in that moment for a sensitive conversation. And there's 3 parts. The first part is your body. And, in a nutshell, it's, both feet on the ground. You're kind of sitting up, but your shoulders are relaxed. Your hands are relaxed. And your face is soft. Because sometimes when we're tense, we don't realize it, but our face is hard.
Right.
And to be mindful of a soft face and relaxed shoulders, but sitting up with your feet on the ground. That's the physical part. The second part is the breathing. And in the breathing, it's, first off, trying to full breaths. And then it's almost like a visualization. As you breathe in, think about a mindset of curiosity instead of judgment, of fear, of, slamming down your point. As curiosity, and coming from that point of, maybe I want to hear what they have to say, and maybe together we can come up, I wonder, what kind of solution we can come up with. So it's almost like an innocence of that curiosity, because you're able to hear things more, and it just is almost a relaxing piece. So as you breathe in, focus on the curiosity, and as you breathe out, just kind of reinforce that you're grounded, you're centered. And so that's the breathing part. And then the last part is they call it generous interpretation. And what that means is really seeing the other person not as adversary, but as a partner in this. And that with the intent of, we can figure out a win-win, and also seeing you in a positive light instead of a negative light. Like just seeing the strengths that you bring to this, and how we can figure this out. And so that really affects your energy level. And so you've got the physical, body posture, the breathing, and then really the mindset of win-win, we can do this. Really does put you in a great place to have a difficult conversation. It's like you're totally centered at that moment.
And, going in with the mindset of it's giving them the benefit of the doubt in a sense.
Yes, definitely.
How do you, sometimes though, people will push back and say, I'm not going to do that. That person blew it, or that they were wrong. I'm not going to give them, anything.
Yeah.
I mean, that might need more time, perhaps. They may not be ready.
Yeah,
as one.
And hopefully, if that existed, that somehow we were involved.
Yeah.
Because what I would want to spend some time coaching with them, because they aren't ready. Their how isn't ready,
right?
And it's not going to play out well if they walk in that frame of mind. And so I would kind of hope to be able to work with them a little bit to get them to see what is not being met. Rule 6. That's creating that animosity. And then if we can get to a point where they can see, well, if you got that need met, would that then satisfy this relationship? And if so, then how do we make sure we get that on the table? All of a sudden, there's more of a strategy, which is role 1. Right. And part of that would be, alleviating any of the assumptions that might have been made, which is role 2. Right. I could go through every role here, how that would tie in. But I guess the bottom line would be, if one party's like that, they're not ready to have the conversation. And if they had to do it, then there would really need to be a third-party facilitator who could then go, okay, Jim, okay, think about it this way,
right.
And that would be very active facilitation to do that. It would be a lot easier if that was more coaching ahead of time,
right? So
that they had the conversation when they were ready.
Yeah.
And that's going back to rule 1 too. Is remember we said in rule 1. What about those conflicts you didn't see coming, and you were caught off guard and you're feeling defensive? And what we said was, have a plan B, an escape route. Because if you go ahead with that conversation at that moment, the odds of anything happening good are minimal at best.
And you shared a plan B in your example.
Yeah.
Earlier, with leading from within.
Right.
So again, that's where I think people struggle. They feel extending the benefit of the doubt or having a plan B is a sign of weakness,
Right.
or that they have failed, especially if it's a superior person in a superior
Yeah.
role in conflict with
Yeah.
one of their staff. And it's not. Actually,
Yeah.
that some of that shows the biggest strength. Or the
Exactly,
biggest
because you're
experience.
overriding all that
Yeah.
emotional you know,
Mhm.
crap that's going on. And that's, again, why coaching could be very
Yeah.
significant to do, because then you can kind of talk through that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it kind of leads us to our final point here, is with respect to Rule 7.
Mhm.
What are other resources? You've mentioned a few, but what other resources are available for our community?
Yeah, and I don't think I mentioned coaching, did I?
Not at all. Would you please talk about coaching?
But it is because we've got a luxury here at University of Denver that we've got coaches.
Yes.
I mean, most
Yeah.
universities don't have that.
Right.
So people should be all over that, in my opinion. But so that would be one. Of course, you could attend the 8 Simple Rules class,
Mhm.
which now it's gonna be a 1-day class of 3 hours instead of separating it into 2 parts.
Mhm.
So that's kind of a shortened version of it, but there's all these videos we have and all the articles that support this. So
Mhm.
there's that. And there's always, if you just don't know what to do, you could always do a facilitate conversation and then not worry about controlling all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Let one of us do that.
Yes.
And then you just come ready to kind of have a conversation in a win-win mindset.
Yeah.
So they've always got those
Yeah.
right in front of them.
So when in doubt, call, reach out to us, and we can
Yeah,
look at different
definitely.
options to help.
Yeah, because it's
these
not a bad thing
processes.
to call us. Doesn't mean you failed. It means actually you're pretty smart
Yeah.
because you're utilizing resources, and then you'll get better and better at it. So
Yep.
why wouldn't you do that?
That's right. Well, there you have it. Rule 7, the how and the what. Thank you very much, Greg.
Yes, you're
Always like
welcome,
working
Ken.
with you. And we'll be scheduling rule number 8 soon. Thank you.